And I'd like to officially welcome all of you to the Stockbridge Library's online poetry series. We are coming to the end of our third season. And before I introduce our poet to you, I do want to take a moment to thank and introduce John Gillespie. When the pandemic rolled in, John was the president of the board of trustees of the Stockbridge Library Association, and he had this fantastic idea of bringing poetry into people's lives during the very challenging years that we had. What started as the idea for let's try it for a few weeks, as I said, has stretched to a few years. So John, it's a great gift to poets and fans of poetry. Thank you so much. And I am also grateful to Barbara Goldberg for joining us today, and she will be sharing her poetry with us. Barbara holds degrees from Mount Holyoke College, Columbia University, and American University. And her poetry has received numerous awards and prizes, including the Felix Pollock Prize in Poetry for her collection, The Royal Baker's Daughter. Some of her other books of poetry include Marvelous Pursuits, Cautionary Tales, and Berta Broadfoot and Pepin Short, which is quite some interesting names. Her poetry has also appeared in many journals and magazines, including the Gettysburg Review, the Paris Review, and Best American Poetry. In addition, she has translated 3 books of Hebrew poetry, has received 2 National Endowment of the Arts Fellowships, and 2 PEN Syndicated Fiction Project Awards. She has received the Emily Dickinson Award for her poem Fortune's Darling, which perhaps she'll read for us here today. And she currently teaches at Georgetown University, the Writers Center in Bethesda, Maryland, and the MFA program at American University. Barbara, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to turn the program over to you, John, and to Barbara.
Yeah, and thank you, Wendy, for the library hosting program 114. So yeah, pretty amazing. What started out as National Poetry Month in 2020 just keeps going and going and going. So Barbara, I have to go off the script. I'm going to start with a little humor. Did the Royal Baker's Daughter work last weekend during the coronation?
Was there a Royal Baker? Maybe there were multiple.
Oh, so, God.
I didn't get to taste it.
Yeah, it's somehow the coronation seems a little bit out of date with what's going on with reality.
Right. Well, I'm not British, so can't comment on that.
Yeah, that's it. Well, thank you for being on our program again, and for jumping in when we had a gap and volunteering to do that. So we start out. What does inquiry mean to you?
Well, there's conscious inquiry where you have a question in your mind and you want it answered, and for that I don't turn to poetry. There's Google. Let's put it that way. But for poetry, the whole joy of it is jumping in where you don't know where you're going. It's jumping into the dark, like diving. And I think of fiction as a conductor bringing in the various pieces, to show off what they can do and no other instrument can do. But for poetry, if I'm starting from a place of where I know what I'm going to say, then I don't want to say it. It's not interesting to me.
So you'd say the majority of the time you just you're diving into the pool and seeing what's in there. There's not a pressing question that you're trying to answer.
No, but I know what's rumbling. Well, I don't really know what's rumbling in my head. I mean, I kind of discover what's in my head in the process of writing. So as I said, it's from the unconscious. When people say, how do you do it? My honest answer is, I don't know. Honestly. And then they say, well, how do you translate, particularly where you don't know the language? And I say, I don't know. I guess I must be uninteresting. to interview, because I would just have to be saying it's unknown.
So let me ask you
You know, I've
this.
heard some of your other poets, and I haven't heard anyone say that particularly, that there's always some kind of, reason. But reason to me is just not all that interesting. Well, at least let's put it this way. In the first draft, it doesn't play a role. It's possible that as the poem progresses, that I'll turn to reason to kind of make something sound better, if anything, and maybe to be more explicit in my head what this is about.
Yeah. No, I think I'll go back to what you said about something rumbling around maybe in your head. And I think most people don't start with, well, I've got a question about Einstein's theory of relativity, and I need to write a poem about it. I'm sure some people have done that, but I think part of it is there is something going on in people that's circulating around that you can't get your hands on, or you want to get your hands on. And poetry is the way for it to kind of come out and become alive.
Well, I'll tell you what is really rumbling around in my head, and I feel so lucky when it happens, and that is some kind of language. There's a word or a phrase that'll get me started, and I don't know why. Sometimes I'd call a poet friend of mine and I'd say, give me a word, any word. And she said, okay, phosphorescent. And then and I have to figure out where to go from there. It's the language that's reverberating rather than an idea or a thought.
So you teach, a lot of writing classes. Is that kind of your guidance to kind of just let it flow? Or
Well,
I'm just trying to
I
figure
do a
out
lot of
how
that in
this.
class too. I've never been very good going A to B, but I've done a lot of that. But these days, I'm working a lot in translation. So that's a different kettle of fish. But teaching is fun because you can play games. Like Linda Paston just recently died, and there was a memorial service for her recently. And I remember when I was teaching, I'd give a poem of hers and write it out as a paragraph instead of with lines, and say to the class, okay, put in the lines where you think they would go. And that was so much fun. And there were so many different ideas. And guess what? Linda did it best.
Nice.
I mean, her
Nice.
line breaks were like perfect.
Yeah. So why don't you share some of your poetry with us?
Well, since I've been talking about the unconscious, I'll read Ballad of the Id. Ballad of the Id. I am your rose hips and bunting and bootleg, and I am your black bangs, those devil spikes, and I am your spine when you lie down in tickle grass, the zipper, the cock, all glistening and white, and I am the stars that roll in their sockets, that blink on the night. I could be Gibraltar or jukebox or drumstick. Without me, you're puny or pallid and prudish, and with you are banquet, a wishbone with tassels. That time in the bistro, I bit your sister and squealed on the porter. And who pulled you out of the muck of intention? And who sang hosannas for spunk and risk? Who shorted the sheets? Who stole your tom-tom? I did.
Nice.
I'll just tell you one thing about this poem, and that is the muck of intention. That was supposed to be the much of intention. And at that time, I made a mistype. And as Freud would say, always pay attention to your mistakes or slips of the tongue or whatever. So I went with muck. I like it better.
Yeah, I like this. There's a lot of mucking up in poetry, so I think you picked the right word.
Right.
No, it's great. No, it started out, started out a little, it seems like it started out slow for me, and then it just kind of built a real tempo near the end. Really nice.
Right. Got faster.
Yeah. So yeah, do a few more.
Well, because I come from that, I figured I'd do one very different. And this is called Carvel. Have any of you tasted Carvel? I don't even know if they make it anymore. But when I was a kid, It was brand new. I'm sorry to, okay. Carvel. In the summer, when the days were light, longer, we'd pile in the car and drive down Metropolitan Avenue for soft ice cream at Carvel's. Those nights, we could have been a regular American family out for a spin, whose father maybe tossed a ball with his kids, or tousled their hair, or let himself be tickled. But we knew his moods would return, where we tiptoe round the house, lay low. This was the 50s. There was Korea, but it was far away, and it wasn't our war. And they weren't murdering our people. Later I'd learn, but only much later, after he was long gone, that he gave our blue Persian carpet to Franz Smetana, who was broke and could sell it for cash. He also gave money to his mother's 7 brothers and sisters, and some got out in time, dispersing to Israel, Australia, South Africa, or the year he paid the bills for the Swiss sanitarium my uncle stayed after the war to put on fat. These kindnesses, these things my father did without thinking twice. What to say about them, about him, except that how a man treats his own children is only one part of the story, and there are others.
Nice, nice, very nice. So we got some responses. There are some Carvel locations still in New York City and Long Island. So, yeah, I think mine was Howard Johnson's in Brigham's in the Boston area.
Right.
So,
well, I have another one that that kind of plays that same father. I mean, my father, it was a long time before I could write about him because he died when I was 14. And I just didn't have the distance. It was too fraught. But anyway, this one is notable because I have a high school boyfriend in there, and he's actually quite well known. And after the book came out, I hadn't spoken to him since I was in high school, but somehow I contacted him and said, "You're in a poem of mine, you got to read this." Anyway, so that was not really that interesting, but it was nice to get back in contact with him again. He was so narcissistic. I'm so glad I didn't end up with him. Star. It was a silver star with the word liar stamped on it. And my father made me wear it because I was one. He knew I hadn't taken my bath, just turned the faucets on, knew my scrapbook on Brazil was overdue, 2 pictures of the Amazon pasted on the cover. Spinning stories to wriggle out of things made him madder, one deceit compounding another, especially since my father was a man of his word, and his word was gold. I was glad when he died and could let Danny fill me up with no one the wiser. Glad he didn't see me run through his money like a woman bent on ruination. If only he could have lied a little, he who had so little charm, so little social grace. But for him, truth was absolute, was never gray. As for me, there are so many truths, it's hard to tell the one big one that underlies them all. I loved my father, love him even more today, though he was mean and cut me down to size, and I was small to begin with. He left me bare of subterfuge, without a leg to stand on, but my own.
very nice, very nice. Yeah. Yeah, all the memories. Yeah, we have a lot of family stories on poetry. Yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of material there.
Oh yeah, there is. I haven't gotten to my mother yet, but we'll save that for another day.
Yeah, well, Bob, we have to end by midnight, so you got about 12 hours left to play it all out. So let's do this just because we do have a large, I think you have the largest audience and
Yeah,
you know,
sweet.
it means people aren't working again, which is good. When
I
people have
thought it
been
was all
went back
because
to,
of me.
it was because of you, yeah. You know, part of it, yeah, people are too busy at lunchtime now. So so let's do this. We have a little time for the audience to ask a question or give some, you know, make a comment. And because we have so many people, I'd like to just do it a little bit early. So if anybody has a question or comment, just wants to raise your hand, or you can raise the electronic hand of Zoom, whatever works well. And for those newcomers, Michael knows this. I say, don't let the poet off easy. Right, Michael? This is the time to press
I'll raise
hard.
my hand.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm encouraging
Yeah.
Michael.
You're absolutely right, John. And that's why I love the noon time sessions, because you do get to talk a little bit with the poet. And Barbara, first of all, I really appreciate what you've read so far. And I was particularly drawn into Carvel and the way that you used a trip to to get some ice cream as a way to branch off and explore the deeper things going on in Korea, and all of the generosity that wasn't apparent on the surface. I really thought that was so skillful. And also just on the ballad of Yid, I loved the sounds and the way you use sound and repetition in that poem. Was very enjoyable for me. So I wanted to just point that out and thank you.
Well, thank you so much for actually the Carvel. That's something when I started out, I guess I might have had, the taste of Carvel or something like that in my mind. And from then, it went there, but it was not easy. I mean, it doesn't come easy. Some lines just take a very long time to come to. Like I might have a poem that comes very fast, but there might be one line in there. Well, Susanna knows this because I wrote a poem for her anthology. She edited an anthology of Marilyn Monroe poems. And I remember when I heard that she was collecting poems on Marilyn, I remember the first thing I said. Is it okay if I read that one? Does anyone have an urgent pressing?
We have a couple more questions in the chat.
Let's do that.
Let's do that.
Okay.
So from Karen, what is the toughest interview you've ever had?
With you? No.
I mean, after this one? No, kidding. This is like easy. I'm like,
I gotta sleep it off, John.
I know Susanna is still smiling after her poetry time.
The toughest interview. I like being interviewed. I mean, because it gives me a chance to think on my feet, which is not torture for me. I have a friend who says, that she doesn't know how I do it. I just get up there and talk. Maybe I was a chatterbox when I was little.
I think there's value. I like talking things out. So I like that method of someone asking you a question and then kind of letting it flow in a conversation. So let me jump to the next one. So how has working on translation of others' poetry impacted your poems?
Actually, quite a lot. If there's anything that makes you more sensitive to language as a whole, and I see some translators here too, it's you're in another landscape, you're in another world, you're in another mindset, and I find that very refreshing. One poet I've translated, an Israeli poet, had a lot about the landscape, and that's never done anything for me. I wish it would, but it never has. And then, there's someone here, he was here, Roger, who's translating something from, the 14th century. And it's lovely to kind of get a inkling of how the mind works at a different time, a different place, different language that I would use for sure. And I just find it a treat. It's a way to travel to another world without leaving your chair.
let me just ask you this. How do you keep true to that culture or that era, when you're translating? There was, I don't know, I watch a lot of TV shows. So someone was doing something and referenced like I don't know, a cell phone or something else, and it hadn't come out yet. It was still 10 years away. So I'm just wondering, obviously our current stuff time just flows into what we're doing. How do you keep, authentic with the spirit of the times, if you were going to call it that?
It's funny you say cell phone, because the Hebrew language, the language is based on the Old Testament. And they, like all the words that are in the Old Testament, they use in common everyday speech. Well, what do you do with telephone? There was certainly no telephone in the Garden of Eden. So they came up, I'm sure by now they say telephone. But then when they were constructing the language, they did Elijah's chariot, because it went to that part of the Bible, because it went so fast that it was somehow burning something or other. It was traveling a great distance in a short time. And they kind of went with that. So I'd say iPhone is easy pie compared to some of the things that people have had to translate. I mean, I think the hardest thing to translate are colloquialisms. It's not particular words, colloquialisms and jokes. Jokes are very hard. It's not as though you translate the joke, that wouldn't work at all. It's kind of like you have to recreate it in some way. To a similar, you're never going to get it exact. Well, you're never going to get anything exact in translation.
So the final question is, someone wants to know, how much revising do you do of your poems?
What a question. I'm so obsessive, John. You wouldn't believe it. You should see my desk. But I do a lot. But some poems don't need it. But most of the poems take a lot of revising. And, the one thing I do that I don't think many poets do, well, like when I get my hands on a poem or teeth on my poem, I don't let it go until I feel it's finished. And the question is, how do you know it's finished? And what I say about that is when it stops itching. Seriously. So I was
we'll ask Dr. Robin for a prescription for stopping the itching.
Right.
Well, good. Let's jump back into, you had something from that first question about, toughest interview or translation you wanted to share with us. It was after the first one, the toughest interview, and you said, yeah, I want to read this. And then I said, well, let's answer these other two questions. So
Did I ask about an interview? Because I quite like being interviewed.
No, something.
The one thing that I remember actually was I was interviewed by an African American, and he brought up something about the Holocaust and how did I feel about it. Well, that's complicated because I lived with it. It was in my house. My parents are survivors. So I answered in a way that I think kind of surprised him and surprised me, because I didn't know I thought that until I said it, which was, I kind of really feel that it's a matter of chance who you're born into and what world you're born into. But honestly, I feel it could have happened anywhere under different circumstances. And now we have to do it all, the wars and genocides we've had since. It's in human nature. I hate to say it, but it is. So victims and the oppressed and all of that is part of our nature. And what can we do but just, pray that AI will cure all that or else bring our downfall. I don't know.
Well, Susanna said, you mentioned it was the poem on Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah. Okay, this is a corker. So this was my first thing that I said when I heard that Susanna was doing an anthology on Marilyn Monroe. I said, had it been me, I never would have chosen her. She was never an idol of mine. I never particularly envied her or even thought she was beautiful. So here's the poem, Marilyn. I thought, well, this will stick out because everyone's going to be saying how gorgeous and how smart she was. Had it been me, I never would have chosen her. Too blonde, too white, too drop-dead gorgeous, not to mention her voice, breathy and hesitant. I guess some men like that. Luckily for Marilyn, I'm not a man. Now take Audrey Hepburn, petite, spiked bangs, French twist, her taste for wit. Someone I could grow into. So many girls like to make themselves stupid or lose on purpose, like this girl in college, also blonde, also stacked. She could spin 1,000 angels on the head of a pin, but at parties, she'd drink too much and act dumb. The boys, she said, ate it up. I wouldn't even want a guy like that, who wouldn't know how to spar or crack a joke, who'd simply ache to dive head first into her décolletage and sleep in the pillowy softness of her flesh. I preferred those who hoarded secrets, little treasures, buried like truffles, deep in the underbelly of the earth.
Hmm.
Okay, so originally, or maybe I'll let you digest it a little bit. Originally, it ended on dive headfirst into her décolletage and sleep in the pillowy softness of her flesh. And I was so happy to find the word pillowy that I said, okay, that's the end. And then I thought to myself, how surprised am I by this? And for some reason, I really can't tell you why, there's no connection. The word truffles came to me. And I know absolutely nothing about truffles. So that started a search on Google and, the encyclopedia, and to find language associated with truffles. And I wrestled with, let's see, the two last lines. It was really for months. I mean, no one wants to be a poet because that's all you're going to think about in your spare time. But actually, I quite love it. So it was really, I had so much language then, from research, that I had to weed it out and kind of sculpt it to hoarded secrets. Sleep in the pillow. I preferred those who hoarded secrets, little treasures, buried like truffles, deep in the underbelly of the earth. And then it kind of traveled from up here to, as we girls say, down there.
Oh
And,
my.
So I felt, oh, well,
Oh,
that's progression.
yeah. No, really nice, really nice. So there's another quick question. Does a public reading of a poem affect your editing choices?
No, like I don't even understand the question. You mean, do I try to
Like if you gave a public reading and your poem's not published, I'm interpreting. I mean,
Oh.
obviously this person could come online and ask specifically, but if you gave a public reading and it wasn't published, and then you went back and you had some kind of truffle experience, and which I'm now going to, Barbara, I'm going to be using that for the next like 20
can't
poetry
quote,
session.
digest them anymore.
We're going to be evaluating people on their truffle ability to end a poem. I just didn't know if it's like you say it out loud somewhere, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, that thing's not done yet. I still
feel the itch.
Yeah. Yeah.
I honestly,
No, it's like what it says, once you read it out loud, are there lines you might change? Maybe that's a little different. You're reading it.
It is different.
I think a lot of poets I've heard, when you actually read it, it now becomes something different than just the written word. And part of it is you may, at that time, want to change it.
Well, that assumes that I don't hear it myself before I read it for an audience. I mean, I can hear.
No, you're writing it. You're writing it. Let's say you're just writing it and you finished, and then all of a sudden you pick up the paper and you read it to yourself or whatever, your spouse, partner, or friend. You read it kind of just off the cuff to somebody. I think the question is, it's still kind of unfinished. Just once again, I know we're spending a lot of time on this. Let's wait, here we go.
You know what? I didn't mean to be so confused.
Here we go, Maria. Lay it
Yeah,
out there,
what
girl.
I was trying to say was when you do read in public, I mean, of course, I read my work to myself out loud, but sometimes when I've read in front of an audience, I can hear the word differently, and I say, wow, that could be changed. And sometimes I change it right on the spot. So I was just asking if you ever have that sensation.
I know many poets feel that, and I'm trying to be honest about this. I really, I mean, I can tell maybe when I read it that it's not good altogether, and then I'll, but on the whole, as I said, I don't let a poem go until I feel it's finished. And once it's
Okay.
finished, it's like locked in place. I can't describe it. It's a
Oh, that's
wonderful
funny.
feeling.
Okay. Thank you.
And I apologize for Maria for a bad interpretation of your questions. So,
No, you said it right. It's just that I'm sure there are other poets here, and there are a number, who would say it would, who wouldn't have, my experience of having it be so locked.
yeah, no, great. Let me just say this one thing before I want to hear more of your poems. I put a little note to everyone in the chat. If you want to be on our mailing list, you can email me. We'll put your name on the mailing list. We do not give it to anyone, sell it to anyone. There's only one person in the world that has it, which is me, and it's under lock and key. No, part of it is we send out a weekly email, and if you want to be on the list, you can get it. You can also go to the Stockbridge Library and find it. But if you want to be on our list, just send me an email, and my address is in the chat. So, Bob, I know we're having a lot of like off the poem conversations here today. Yeah, that's it. So go ahead and pick some things to read.
There was something that reminded me of something that, of course, I now forget. Well, I'll read another poem that I struggled with one line, and I bet you, or at least I hope, that you cannot figure out the one line that kept me struggling for so long. So I shall read There for the Grace. And now this came from a newspaper story. It was one day where, I read the newspaper and there were like 4 stories on when you made the spread. And there was something about this one story that kicked off something within me. And it's called There for the Grace. There for the grace of God, there for the grace, there for the window the housekeeper carelessly left ajar, for the 5-year-old boy who fell from the 53rd floor, there for the musician, his father, and his guitar, there for the mother, and there for the cruise ship out for a cruise, for the cripple whose wheelchair was pushed and tumbled down into the Mediterranean, there for the blue of the sea, of the starling and finch and the hyacinth, there for the lover who follows the script, who touches the lips and within the mystère, there for the sweet inhalation of breath, for the arm casually raised to brush back the hair, there for the grace of God, for the grace of earth, we go.
I'm going there for the grace of earth. That's my vote.
Well, we have to take a vote.
You'll have to take a survey says.
I'm wondering why you chose that line.
No, because I think the first line there, but for the grace of God, is such a, kind of standard part of the literature that second, what was it? There for the, say it again?
Grace of earth we go.
Yeah. Yeah, that just really did. It kind of just has a different, I don't know, you got God over here, but earth is just, it just felt very substantive. And it kind of played off the God thing. So I just felt like, maybe at the end, all of a sudden, there for the grace of God, except we got the grace of the earth. I don't know.
I wish I'd thought of it, but I didn't. Well, as I said, it came from a newspaper story, and some of you will and others won't remember. But who was it whose son fell off the 53rd?
Eric Clapton.
Yes, Eric Clapton. So that was one story on one part of the paper. And on the same page, there was something about who was that guy, Leo, who was pushed over his wheelchair? I mean, there was a terrorist attack on a boat. So,
I don't know his name,
Klinghoffer.
but you're right.
Yeah,
What's that?
it was
Klinghoffer.
That's it.
Klinghoffer, exactly.
so that was the
Klinghoffer.
second story, but actually,
think it was
and there were
the
more,
killing-
it doesn't matter. The line, and it was because the music was wrong. And I can't tell you how I knew that, but I just did. And so the line that took me forever, and I'm not even sure. Okay, so I had there for a cruise ship, out for a cruise for the cripple whose wheelchair. Okay, and then the next line was pushed and tumbled down into. That's the line. I couldn't get it. And I don't know why nothing else satisfied me. I mean, it's literally what happened was pushed and tumbled down into the Mediterranean there for the blue. So it was that line. It really did take months. But I'll tell you, it's something to think about when you don't have anything else to think about. What should I do with that line or with the language in that line?
Nice, nice. Well, yeah, keep going. You're on a roll.
I'm on a roll. Okay. Did I have a red star? Furlough, this is like nothing that's been, oh, but it has a secret too. You know, I do like to tuck little secrets or jokes to myself in there. And again, I can't tell you how it happens. It just does. Furlough. I love to see those tall, lean, muscular men with their clean-shaven heads and digital watches toss their kids in the air. And I love to see them drop, not weightless, but light as grenades. This is how children learn that fear can be fun. And fathers, that this too is hand-to-hand combat. To cradle or kill. What story do we tell ourselves to justify? That a dunam of earth is worth dying for? That a child opening his mouth with an O of pleasure overturns everything? We grow like onions, our heads buried in dirt, and we die like onions, face down in a pot of boiling water. Gravity causes all to fall down, and love to hold things up.
Yeah.
So where'd those onions come from? I guess
don't
it
know.
came with the truffles. They were written years apart.
Yeah, I think you're spending too much time in a grocery store.
Ah,
No, but it's so funny what you say about your words and hidden words. I don't know why it came into mind. You know, what was that TV show that Groucho Marx had?
oh. Say the
Never?
magic word and win $1
Yeah,
billion.
and literally it was probably the bodiest. Yeah, the censors, they never knew what to do with that thing because Groucho would just go off on stuff, and the bird came down, or so, I don't know. When I thought your this hidden words, all of a sudden Groucho came to mind. I don't know why. So because there was a hidden word. If you guessed the right word, the word came down instead of the bird. Yeah. Obviously, I'm watching too
onions.
much TV. What's that?
The onions.
The onions. Yeah, the onions. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing.
Oh, here's one that comes from headline of the National Enquirer. For a while, I thought I like to write series. So the Bertha Broadfoot is quite a lengthy series about the mother of Charlemagne, by the way, and it's all historically accurate. So it's a long series. But miracle, did I say miracle? Yeah. Miracle of Bubbles?
I don't think you read that one.
No, I didn't. But maybe that isn't the one I said I was going to read. Oh, the headline one. Okay, this is a good one. And then, as I said, since I like to write series so much, that way I don't have to think about what to write the next day. I thought I'd do a book. Oh, Susanna, this is up your alley. A book on National Enquirer headlines. So this was one. Girl trades baby for prom dress.
Wait,
So-
say that again.
Girl trades baby for prom
For
dress.
trades baby for prom dress?
Exactly.
Oh, boy.
Okay, so I thought, well, it attracted me right away, but I couldn't get started on it. I mean, I held it in my head for a while and I thought, well, what's this about? And then a friend said to me, oh, well, just imagine the dress. And that got me going. So that's what I did. How smug we feel, we who measure want in dollops. But imagine her wanting to distraction and to be so trapped. That's how much she wants the blue chiffon with blue spaghetti straps, blue rose pinned to the waist, and shoes dyed to match. She wants the gardenia wristlet to dance under the bluest moon, a chance to be elected queen, to neck in a rented limousine. A horse isn't hers to give, nor gold, nor tea. Kings have traded more, been called heroic. When Anna abandoned Sergei, wasn't she tragic? These days I feel my own parched throat, the bedrock crumbling. For the fecundity of your embrace, I too would pay, and dearly.
Okay. I need the video of that prom.
Of the dress.
Yeah, the dress. Yeah, that was really nice, really nice. Listen, let's have another little Q&A session because the clock tends to speed up in the last 20 minutes. So does anybody comments? I know we kind of had a lot of questions already, but
I'm seeing people
comments.
from all different sides of my life. It's really thrilling. I mean, in the audience.
Dr. Robin said, wow, surprise ending grabbed me. Maria, oh my God, you can't beat the National Enquirer headlines. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, yeah. Anybody have any comments, questions? Very quiet audience today.
Yeah, no, I had a question. It was way back there. Last lines, they're so
Oh.
critical. Do you find yourself sometimes ending up with two endings and then having to lop off whatever? I mean,
I
I do
do.
all the time, but I don't know.
I do. And they say about endings, they're either like the click of a locked door, it's that satisfying, or a window, it just kind of flows out and you don't really know where you're going after the end of it. And I do struggle with those last lines. I wish I could say everything comes so natural, lickety split, but that's just not true. So I guess I like both endings. On that last one, what would you call it? A window or a door? I too would, for the fecundity of your, okay, so this starts getting a little autographic towards the end. These days, I feel my own parched throat, the bedrock crumbling. For the fecundity of your embrace, I too would pay, and dearly. That kind of signaled the end of a marriage. I have other poems which kind of tell me that's going to happen before it actually happened in fact. And that way, what can I say? Preconscious, I didn't know it at the time, but somehow a poem will bring me someplace in the future, to the future. Now, how do your endings work?
Oh, mine?
Yeah.
I usually overwrite a little bit. And so I look at it and I very often just lop off the last line because it explains too much.
Have you ever found that?
Yeah, you like the one that kind of leaves a little open-ended, and that I kind of find that more intriguing.
Have you heard the word scaffolding used in terms of beginnings? Like the beginning stuff is just scaffolding to get to the point.
Oh,
A lot of times there are extra lines at the beginning that you can lop off.
oh yeah, the beginning. Yeah, definitely. I almost never keep the first stanza. or it becomes something else. I
Interesting.
cannibalize a lot of my work though, to make it
Well,
shorter.
you know, what do they say? Cut your darlings. It's painful.
Actually, that was Frank Bidar. Who
Darn,
said
I
it.
thought it was Howard Nemroff, but
He said,
anyway, it's wise.
Kill your darling.
Maybe it was Betty Davis for all we know. But that I find very useful advice. Usually the part that you like best is the worst.
Exactly. Yeah.
You don't know it at the time, so you have to live with it a little while to know.
I'm going to ask you a question about that piece you did about your father. Well, that was the Carvel piece, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
How long did it really take you to do that? I mean, including therapy.
Well, you mentioned that. I probably was, God, how well do I know these people here? Okay. I'm probably one of the last people in the world who was in psychoanalysis. They don't even do it anymore. And I was in for a very long time. And I think I had to somehow, because through that process, and even through therapy, you get some distance from all the wounds of early childhood, and you see, hey, wait a minute, he was a person too, and he had issues, and so did my mother. Everyone's parents have issues too, and they tend to, I don't know if the word rub off is right, but you tend to inhale them. So it takes a while to kind of free yourself from that. I always say it takes a woman until she's 35, until she can't blame her parents anymore. By then you've made enough of a mess of your life, you know, or you made enough mistakes that you can understand. But for a boy, it's earlier, boy. I think it's about 10 years earlier that can kind of get free. And I'm not quite sure why. Maybe girls are into relationships in a stickier way, for lack of a better word.
Well, Rob, let me just jump in here with we got another comment. So Barbara Green said the last lines felt much more personal than when went before. You talked about that a minute ago, but you know, Dr. Robbins said it sounds like something you weren't ready to admit to yourself, but your unconscious knew, or
Exactly,
your pre-conscious. Yeah.
exactly, right. And now
Yeah.
how do you access that when you're fully conscious? You know, that's maybe Dr. Robin has some advice on that, because we'd all like to get in touch with that. And conscious is the big mystery. That's just sort of at the top layer. Probably
Yeah.
someone who's an accountant here would find me very annoying, because the progression of thoughts, I know because I have an accountant friend, and she says, Barbara, I never can follow you. This is terrible. But then I say, well, why don't you spread your legs and enjoy it? But I don't say that to her, because I don't go A, B, C, D. I go A, Z, F, whatever. But, you know, you got to tie it together. And I'm seeing someone from college here, which is nice, because I was a philosophy major in college. I don't know if philosophy took me to poetry. I think I always wrote, even as a child, my character was Little Miss Fuss Budget. So I'm not sure what the connection is, but I have to tell you, I don't know how my life is connected. I'd like to know that a lot. I should bring in my accountant. Maybe ABCD would be helpful at this point in my life.
I'm an accountant, but I like your method. I go A, G, D, M. Yeah,
Right.
you don't want to stay. You don't want to stay with one part of the alphabet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So share some more of your poems if you can.
Let's see. Oh, this is a heartbreaker. Well, I guess since I talked about Anna Karenina, oh, by the way, there was something very disappointing. I wrote a poem. I read this poem, and it was to a much younger audience. And I have to say, no one in that audience knew who Anna Karenina was. I mean, I was shocked. Well, you know, there goes half my poems. I don't know. But they weren't stupid, by the way, and they weren't ill-educated. They just had no idea. When I taught, I did teach Anna Karenina for many years. And the reason for that is I always had all girls in my, for some reason, I must have titled the class, they were always women. But when I knew I was going to teach Anna Karenina, I said lust and love in fiction or something like that. And the word lust drew in a fair number of boys. So I had a co-ed class for that. Question
There
of
you go.
aesthetics. He never wrote a letter without the words despair or terror, as in, even as a child, I knew despair, or how to turn this terror into art. How romantic it seemed then, like living a Russian novel. His final note read, tell her our relationship was fully satisfying in every way. No one ever says how thrilling pain is, how it takes you like a lover, how your body cringes before surrender. At first you cry, no, no, then swoon into its burly arms. You should see your open mouth, your breath coming in harsh gasps. Trust pain to find the choicest part, the marrow, and suck out resolve, leaving you limp. But oh, how you'll sleep. The only burden heavier than pain is boredom, want of danger. When I teach Anna Karenina to young girls, I say, every woman should experience one disastrous love affair and survive. How like a woman Anna was, to hesitate because she could not bear to throw her red purse away. How like a man he was, to put a bullet someplace deadly. As a woman who survived, I see boredom now as comfort, devotion as something precious, and death in any form, a slap across the face.
Whoa.
Maybe I should take this. I realize I haven't done this before. This is my new book of
Breaking and
selected,
entering. Yeah.
yes, of
Wow.
selected poems. And just as I obsess over language, I do so over the covers of my books. And this took a lot. But I think one of my now older sons said, Mom, do you realize you have a naked woman on every cover of every book you've ever said, oh my God, let me think.
Oh boy.
Well, in some way or another. So
Yeah.
breaking and entering, by the way, I felt it in myself as the unconscious, not into a home. You know what I mean? Breaking and entering into, well, like a person's soul. And for that, I maybe should read the title. It's not the title poem. I spent so much time looking for a title for this one. What's it called? Oh, no, I think I'll do this. This will be my last poem, okay? Right?
Yeah, it's 12:53. You got time
Okay,
for
I'm
two
gonna do
more,
something
if
else
you
with
want. One or two.
Huh?
One or two, whatever you choose.
Okay, meantime, maybe I'll remember the name of that other poem. I always say that this is the difference between a poet and a fiction writer, okay? And it is a question of obsession. Like, what do people obsess about? What does a visual artist obsess about? I don't think it's possible to be an artist unless you're obsessive in some way. So here, this is a poem called The Future Has Already Happened. Imagine I'm Little Red Riding Hood, and you're the woodcutter, and you've read it too. Imagine the wild cesarean, the axe and its fresh cut, the blade running deep, and me springing out to dance on the planked floor with Granny in her white nightdress, soft and white to the touch. Oh, the body and its sweet decay. But I leap ahead of the story. Years later, we meet and we marry. Then there's the birthing and the baking of cookies to be carried in the forest. I'm sorry, by cookies to be carried in a basket by the girl setting off in her red hood. So the word I even in Blue Line, in those days when there was Blue Line, I came back to this and was changing it to the final minute. And then years later, I'm still thinking about it, and see what you think. Years later, we meet and we marry. Then there's the birthing and the baking of cookies to be carried in a basket by the girl setting off in her red hood, by the girl setting off in her red hood, or by a girl setting off in her red hood. And I think, if you think about it, they mean very different things. I mean, really, it's a different meaning. If it's by the girl, excuse me, setting off in her red hood, it's the same girl, the girl. And if it's by a girl, it's a different girl from century to century.
Yeah.
At least that's the way I think of it. I'm willing to change it for my posthumous anthology.
Great. So read one more, then we have to sign off for
Okay.
this week.
Breaking and entering. Gee, I wrote it down. It's slipping my mind. I think I'll have to turn to another one, another wonderful one. Okay, so when I was around 50, I learned that my father had an affair, which I didn't know. An aunt told me that, and I think she was trying to hurt me. But actually, I think she was surprised by my reaction because I felt very happy about it. I feel everyone should find some happiness in life, no matter how. And I just knew that he and my mother were not a match. And so I'm glad that that he had someone that he cared about, at least I think. Oh gosh. Okay, so I gave him 3. I'll read the last one, okay? Lily. Had it been me, I would have chosen Lily Robinson for her cigarette holder and thin pell-mells, the only one in the refugee circle who drew a beauty mark next to her mouth, wore slinky black tuxedo pants paired with a white satin shirt. She had the same air as Marlene Dietrich, only Lily's hair was black and shiny with razor-sharp bangs and spit curls. Who wouldn't have adored Lily, so devil-may-care, singing chanson while husband Willie ran chords along the baby grand? Rumor had it that there was a threesome, Lily, Willie, and Dodo, all 3 the best of friends. The rest of the country loved Ozzie and Harriet. No wonder I felt a world apart. Where everyone was here was because of Hitler. Everyone escaped while others had perished. Everyone took pills to bring on sleep, took marital risks, drove too fast, favored sweets, and could not get enough.
A great way to end your readings today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Wow.
Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, we got some family stuff, which is always great. We got a poem with multiple endings. You gave us the whole spinning wheel of options there with your poetry, and that was really great. Fantastic. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
I second that, Barbara. Thank you so much for
Oh,
sharing
you're wonderful.
your work with all of us, and thank you all for joining us. We will be back here on Zoom next Tuesday with another poetry reading. I wish all of you a wonderful afternoon.
Yep.
I have
great.
one
All right.
PS. One PS.